Okay, welcome everybody to the Friday night farm stream. I'm Stephen Reichert. This is Rowan Ridge Farm, and this is about the only place in farming that we can get a substantial amount of credit for just talking about doing work in the spring rather than actually picking up a rake or a shovel or getting on a tractor and getting some of that done. Um, our mission here, as we are raising heritage hogs on pasture the old fashioned way in Western New Hampshire, is to help make America farmers again because we believe that the small American family farm is the key to revitalizing American culture, which certainly has been run down and is struggling. And so we're sharing what we're doing here and using these Friday night live streams as an opportunity to commiserate with you guys here. And I would like to just pop into the chat here for a second, see how we're doing. How's everybody this evening? Do we have anybody here? I guess would probably be a better question to ask. Is anybody out there? Um, let's see. I gotta arrange my desktop a little bit. Okay.
Exceptional design.
Okay, guys. I will cut this out a little bit later. Hey guys, welcome to the Friday Night Farm stream. I'm Stephen Reichert, and this is Rowan Ridge Farm. We're raising heritage hogs on pasture, also breeding them. I always forget to include the breeding. In fact, breeding is the majority of what our operation is here, and we're sharing what we are doing. In fact, this is one of the few places where you can get more credit for talking about work on a farm rather than actually going out and picking up a shovel or a muck rake. And we want to share what we're doing so that we can help strengthen a community around the small American family farm because that is the centerpiece for American culture. And we want to do everything we can to help you guys as you are all either on that journey yourselves, looking towards being involved in that journey, or possibly just interested in the odd ways that people choose to suffer in rural America by owning livestock and getting their hands dirty and playing in the dirt. So, anyways, tonight I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about spring cleanup, spring chores. Some of this is going to be me sharing the top 5 things that I am doing, and you call them chores, although each one of these 5 categories has a variety of smaller subcategories that we'll talk about a little bit, that we'll discuss. And I'm interested to hear from you guys what you all are doing and kind of the first priorities right out of the gate as spring arrives in your region. And I'm going to jump into the chat in just a moment and mix it up with you guys a little bit. I see Blue Wagon Farm is here from Texas, right? You guys are from Texas. Fear Not is from Oklahoma. I think I got that right. Every week, it's I haven't completely gone senile yet, but if I do, this is where it's going to be showing initially. And I see Chris Heisteman, who is digging out the duck barn. That's his major spring chore. Yes, spring in Alaska is different from spring in Texas, which is different from spring in New Hampshire. And so I think a certain amount of this, it's going to be relevant or relative, both relative and relevant, based on where we are operating out of and where we're farming. Because so much of farming is just coincidental or circumstantial, because the climate makes a huge difference. The microclimate, even what my climate is here as I'm spitting distance away from the Connecticut River versus 15, 20 minutes away from me, somebody that's at slightly higher elevation, maybe a little bit more rocks, a little more woods. There's a lot can change over a very small bit of distance, and so many of those factors are going to determine what animals are best to keep. If you're able to really grow crops, how you're going to be feeding your animals. Are they going to be rooting in forest foraging, or are they going to be grazing on like cover crops in a pasture setup? So there's a lot, obviously, in a very small area that can change. And obviously, if we're talking about going all the way across the country, some of this stuff might be very reasonable and rational to you. Some of it may seem a little bit out of left field, depending on where you are tuning in from tonight. Um, to start with, I'll bring you guys up to speed on what is going on here around the old farmstead. Um, just checking in here with the chat. Blue Wagon Farm says, yes, Texas, that may change with us breeding pigs now because our processor closes to domestics between October through January. Wow. That sounds like it would be challenging. And Blue Wagon Farm says, I don't really have season-specific chores. The mowing slows a little bit in our winter, but other than that, it's business as usual. Well, yeah, here in New Hampshire, and I suspect that this is the way it is in places that have 4 distinct seasons. And I remember I lived in Alaska when I was younger. That's actually the first experience I had ever with raising hogs, was when I was living in Alaska. And there's definitely very distinct seasons that you have when you have an actual winter, and everything is kind of done from, depending, the springtime, whenever spring technically really gets off the ground, like from the time that you can see the dirt and things start coming up out of the dirt, from that time until the frost starts and the snow starts falling, everything that's done between those 2 points, everything is to kind of prepare for the next time the snow comes in another 9 or so, 8 or so, 9 or so months at that point. And so it's very much like the clock is ticking. And before we get into the specifics of the chores, it's one of the striking things that always kind of blows my mind, because I think in our modern way of life, we've lost so much awareness and appreciation for just how long it takes. Like, I was at the grocery store today and I'm walking past, yes, I am guilty of going to the grocery store. I don't grow all my own food yet. Um, and I'm walking past the freezer that has it's just full of hams. There must have been, I don't know, 50, 75 frozen hams inside the freezer. And I'm walking past there and I'm thinking, man, like the amount of work and time and feed that it took, like when you kind of know what's going on the back end to produce all of those nicely wrapped, pretty cuts of ham and those shoulders, it's like there's a lot that goes into it. And we just walk past it and it's like, I'll throw this in my cart. Nah, I don't feel like that. I'll get it next time. It's just going to be there. And it's really something. And guys, if you haven't done so already, like the stream, because that gives us a little bit more reach, a little bit more visibility, as we're trying to reach more folks as we try to make America farmers again. And obviously, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel, because we have a lot more good stuff coming here. I'm working on a couple of video edits, going to be about mostly related to porta huts and some ideas for raising livestock, specifically pigs, without a barn in play, and using pasture-based systems to your advantage. Because I know a lot of people kind of find themselves in the world of pastured pork just because of the fact that, well, you don't have money for a pole barn, but you have land, And so you got to start somewhere, and a porta hut or some other sort of portable shelter for your pigs can be a relatively cost effective way to get a foot on the ladder and start producing pork. And in my opinion, especially in light of all the crap that went wrong with farrowing for me this spring, I am leaning towards the idea that the outdoor method of raising animals and farrowing them, I think that there are actual advantages to doing it that way over having everybody in the barn. Good evening, Mr. Lightfoot, and welcome. Um, so, in terms of chores, I went around the farm a little bit today and started kind of making a list. I know I put a post out on the channel, was it yesterday, kind of trying to field some questions and some topics for today's live stream. And I got to start doing that earlier in the week. But I got a couple requests from one of our channel members here, Secret Noise Pictures, who hopefully will show up at some point this evening. And he was asking about um, if I had any apps or programs or tips and tricks for keeping books organized on the farm or within the farming business. And unfortunately, I was kind of scratching my head because my best friend in all things record keeping is these little notebooks, and like the larger well, I don't want to pull that out from under the camera and jiggle it, but like moleskin notebooks of all shapes and sizes. That's predominantly what I am relying on as I am doing record keeping. So I don't have anything great in that department, and we opted to kind of go for the chores. And so I'm thinking about, what are we going to have the stream be about this evening? And I'm walking across the driveway and I'm looking down into the pasture where we have a little pond sitting there, and there haven't been pigs anywhere near this pond for months and months, since like the late fall. And I see something in, like, the pond is just melting off and the ice is breaking up, and I see like a little round black thing poking through the ice, and I'm like, what in the world is that? And I actually was heading out because I had to go to the doctor's with my wife, and we were like, is that, there's no way that's a pig, like there haven't been pigs in there for a while. And so we decided to put a pin in it, figuratively speaking, and come back and check when we got home from the doctor. So I got home, and in the process of, getting stuff set up for the stream, I said, you know what, I really have to know what's going on out there, and jumped the fence, went down this very steep little bowl where the pond sits, and sure enough, it was one of my Berkshires. And I am not 100% sure when that pig went to her watery grave, but it looked like she'd been in there since the fall. And when they were relatively small, when I first brought them home, they were adjacent to the pond and had a little bit of access there just so that they could get water to drink. And my best guess is she must have slipped and fallen through, gone under the ice when there was just like a hole in the ice, must have gone under and didn't come back up until now when ice is out. Because I looked all around the fence, around the perimeter, there's no signs of, forced entry, and there's electric on both sides of the fence, so there's no way they could have just broken in. So yeah, it was an interesting way to start off my spring cleanup, is with removing a pig that's waterlogged and has been sitting in the pond for about 3 months. Her stomach ruptured, and I'm assuming it's just kind of, as things have started to warm up, gases expand, and it just kind of stomach ruptured with guts starting to come out. And I got to figure out how and where I'm going to put her, because I don't really have an easy way to dig a hole. And so probably going to have to drag her up above my property and put her out in the woods and let the scavengers do their work and reclaim reclaim the remainder of her carcass. But yeah, it's kind of a macabre way to start the spring. But yeah, springtime, I always feel a ton of pressure because there's so much stuff that through the winter when it's, single digits, and there literally is very little you can do because a lot of times a lot of the cleaning that needs to happen, it's so cold that like the poop freezes, and so it's just like little stones frozen in place and there's nothing you can do until everything thaws out. And then once everything thaws, then all the cleanup has to happen all at once because now, you know, all of the, we'll get it later when it thaws out, all of those chickens come home to roost. And now you're behind the eight ball and you got to get everything cleaned up. You got to get everybody out of there. And so, yeah, it's always a little bit of a stressful situation in the spring. Although I will say, um, it's probably good to have a little bit of pressure and deadline because if it wasn't for that, I probably would get very little of it done. And we've been scrambling trying to get things straightened out with piglets too. Most everybody has been pretty gracious about the piglets as we've been trying to fill some of those orders, but there's a couple of sticky wickets here and there, but for the most part, it looks like we're going to be able to get it done. I sold a friend of mine, or actually traded him for babysitting the farm a couple of weekends, and we went away last summer. I traded him a couple of piglets, one of which was a boar, and a couple of females, and so they're kind of like my pigs or from my lineage or my stock that I sold him, and he bred them, and so his babies are having, or his pigs are having piglets this spring, and so I'm buying back some of those piglets from my piglets that I sold him to replace some of the ones that my piglets or my pigs lost. So it's kind of funny. I've been able to replace a lot of the losses that I've had by working with other farmers that I've sold breed stock to. And so financially it's not great, but at least from an ethical standpoint, I'm not having to go, and get lesser animals. It's just my animals, but at a different farm, I guess you could say. Jumping into the chat here for a second. Chris Heitzman says, also acquired 6 local chickens and will be getting 10 more chicks probably in May. Awesome. And we'll let any hens that want to sit hatch their own broods. Very cool. I always love when chickens get broody. I mean, I hate chickens. I hate roosters, really. Like the chickens, I don't mind that much because like the females, they're less aggressive about their nonsense. The males just, man, they just drive me nuts. A friend got out of chickens and rabbits due to cost, so you got to reap the benefits. That's good. That's good. Bolino's Bounty is here for the evening, late to the party, but did make it. Don't worry, Mike. We haven't been going that long. I'm late to the party as well because I was trying to figure out like how to make a title for spring chores, and it's like, am I really going to do a live stream just talking about doing work? I mean, I guess it's YouTube. That's what we do here. So yeah. And oh, hey, Secret Noise Pictures. This is you're the impetus behind this topic because as I was starting to tell the group earlier, I don't really have any good tricks for managing and doing bookkeeping, any apps to like streamline the process. I have Moleskine notebooks. I love Moleskine notebooks. If I'm really getting fancy, I'm going to use like graph paper. And folks, if you are just joining us, like the stream, please, so that we can get this out to more people and make America farmers again. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel because we got a lot more content coming. I'm working on videos, and you can say what a lot of different things about the videos that I make, but they are very, 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 very far from polished AI slop. That's my selling point. I can't say too much about what I do, but I can at least say it's not AI slop. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Good evening, Ginger. Good to see you here. And let's see, Mike is tracking. He's packing for his trip up to New Hampshire tomorrow morning. Awesome. Well, good. Well, we'll see you up here. I don't have anything super interesting going on this weekend. I'm just starting to fiddle around and get to some chores. So I did order some feed, and that was kind of the big thing. That it's like every 2 months, as the feed starts to run lower and lower, once you kind of get to that last container of feed, it's like you can, at least for me, this is the way that it always goes. And even when the financial woes are not quite as clear and present as they have been this spring with the losses of piglets, but once you get down to that last container of feed, it's like I'm envisioning what's going to happen. I have nightmares about what if I can't get feed, and then I have all these animals that are going to be starving, and they're going to just run through all the fences, and they're going to go all over town, and I'm going to have the cops called on me. And you know, these are some of the finer points of raising pigs that you don't hear from or hear about on some of the other channels. But this is a big part of my life, worrying about those phone calls on Saturday morning when I'm trying to enjoy a cup of coffee, and it's like, oh, hey, are those your pigs that are out in the road? That kind of stuff. Although I have to say, we have been fortunate not to get too many of those. Ginger has 2 calves due in a few weeks, and I will have 2 cows to hand milk. Good luck. Well, that's awesome. Um, I I am not a dairy guy, and so maybe there are other folks here who could better speak to this. And again, if you're just tuning in here, like the stream so we can reach more folks. But I think that the younger that you really put the time and effort into training them, I suspect that that's where you're going to see a lot of benefit in doing so, because I feel like the personality of your cows really is kind of the linchpin on which everything else hangs, especially if you're going to be hand milking. And I have not done any hand milking, not had any um, cows that were lactating. I had a couple of cows, but they kind of went to the freezer before they ever got bred. So that's where that started and ended. Although milking was, I do have a milker, like an electric, one of those little plug-in milker things, and my wife, bless her heart, got that for me off of Amazon. And that's like when we first moved in, we were, we had this grand vision for what our farm was going to be. And well, to make a long story excruciating, I have not yet milked any of my animals, although I have been asked, and I am curious, what the downside would be to swine milk. Like, you drink goat's milk, people do anyways. Like, people drink, obviously, cow's milk. Is there a reason why we couldn't milk pigs? I don't know. I imagine some of it is just the logistics of trying to, and the cooperation necessary to milk them, I think, is probably lacking. But Secret Noise Picture says, I have piglets on the way any minute. Today was her due date. Awesome. I figured she'd wait till the coldest 2 days of the week. Yes, that does check out. They always do that, I feel like. Is this your first time with piglets? First time farrowing? I'm assuming this is Mama's first time as gilt, but curious if you've been through this before. Milking is a lot of work, and then you have to fine tune the skills to process it all. Yeah, that's dairy is definitely it's a decent amount of labor and effort and focus unto itself, which is part of the reason why I kind of stopped at the point of getting an electric milker and reading a couple of books. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to put my time into the pigs, because that's just kind of the luck of the draw. And dairy products are certainly super, super handy if you have the time and organizational skills and multitasking abilities to be able to run a small couple of dairy animals alongside pigs. That's a great, they can be very, very complementary. But the idea of just casually doing a couple of cows and a couple of pigs and kind of having one feed the other, I think, unless you're either very, very talented or very well set up or very, very experienced, maybe a combination of those things. That's probably a very optimistic view of everything. First time farrowing for Secret Noise Pictures. Well, we wish you all the best. We wish you luck, health, and forbearance. In my experience, the first couple times farrowing were all the easiest and the best, and it seems like that tends. I mean, I know there's horror stories, but um, I think you'll do good. And first litter for her, first time for you guys. All right, let's see. So, getting into the chore list that I have going on after I dispose of the remains of the poor deceased pig that was bathing in the pond for the last 3 to 4 months. Um, First thing I am trying to do is move my pigs from wherever they are. So I have one group that is in the barn. They've been in the barn all winter. That's pretty much been their area. And during the winter time, nobody's really moving fast. Nobody's going places. There are lapses in the fencing. There's a variety of different things that kind of fall into somewhat disrepair. Everybody's energy level is down. They just want to go curl up in the pile and sleep until it's time to get up and eat, and then they go back to the pile. They don't even really, in many cases, go out and venture too far out of the building if they're in the barn, although they have full access to the pasture and even some woods while they're, throughout the entirety of the winter. But most of the time they don't go more than 15-20 feet outside, and usually that's going to be for the sake of eating a little bit of snow, getting a little bit of, uh, fresh air depending on the temperature. But for the most part, they just come back in, they lay down. And so the barn, I did my very best probably for the first 2/3 of the winter. Every time I would go in to feed, I had my little poop rake, and I would try to, anytime I could see a distinct and discrete turd that hadn't been like stomped into the floor, I would scrape it up and kind of grab a couple when I would come in, toss them outside in the pile, and then when I come back out, grab another few and try to, you're losing the battle but winning the war type of thing. I didn't want it to just completely turn into a dung heap inside of there. And of course, go out of my way to make sure that we're constantly layering fresh hay on the bedding or on the nest so that that gets deeper. And then as the breakdown, the composting happens, generates heat from underneath, which is good for the pigs. It's good for the composting process. And then hopefully what's going to happen now, my goal is to move the animals out of wherever they were for the winter, because it's very hard on those areas. Even though the pigs being in the barn, that's kind of a sacrifice area, they call it. We can kind of afford to have the barn get a little bit messed up because the barn is meant to be durable and the barnyard is meant to be durable, to be used and abused like that. So it's not a huge deal when there's just a bunch of mud and crap and all that. But really what I want to do now is get I call it the upstairs, which is just the woods, because I have 10 acres and I have about 5 acres that's more or less open pasture, and that's kind of like the downhill, flatter section. And then I have the other half that's about 5 acres and it's hilly, rocky, forested. And my project for this spring, and I'm going to try to work on a longer edited video of this, is going to be laying the trees down and not fully cutting them all. Some of them I'm going to completely fell, but laying them down and getting the leaves to sprout, but do that with the trees laying on the ground. So rather than completely cutting everything in half, you leave like a hinge still attached, fold the trees over, and then that way eventually they will succumb and they'll die. But we have a lot of birch up there, as well as some maple, and I'm curious to see if the pigs will do anything with that foliage. and move them uphill away from the barn onto fresh ground. And on one hand, I really am excited about knocking the trees over, disturbing the soil, and trying to start the process of getting that moving somewhat towards silvopasture before I, kick the bucket, hopefully. I don't know how long that's going to take because it definitely is not good pasture. There's not a lot of good pasture potential up there. It's pretty rocky and bony and steep, but there's enough trees growing and it's soft enough in places where I feel like there's at least a decent chance of getting some forage crops to take up there if we can just knock the trees over and get the pigs up there. And the other thing is, obviously, when they're out of the barn and they're out of their winter quarters, that frees up that space so that I can get the tractor in there, because currently I can drive the tractor into my barn. It's a righteous pain in the butt trying to work around 10, 11 pigs that want to know what's going on and put their nose in everything that you're doing. I need to get them out and then pretty much scrape the top layer of manure out of there, manure, mud, compost, the whole nine. And the question of where I'm going to put that and what I'm going to do with that, that's something that I haven't really put a ton of consideration into previously. I have a couple areas on the property that I'm trying to build up because they're a little bit uh, steep. They're kind of dropped off, and what I want to do is level them off with compost materials and plant them, and then kind of over time keep doing that until we have a good layer of soil built up and everything is leveled off. And it also gives me a place to put the uh, multitude of poop instances that the pigs are creating. And I know one of the things I talked about a little bit last week was the fertilizer crisis that is going to, presumably, if everything keeps on going the way that it has been going, that's going to be hitting the bigger farms at some point. The row crop farmers that are growing soy and the various other crops that are going into the pellets and the grain that I'm feeding my pigs, and some of you may also be feeding yours. But for us, we have plenty of fertilizer here, and we're going to be doing everything that we can to use that. And I've been kind of stockpiling it and never really having to take it and repurpose it or shuffle it around in order to kind of improve the soil. And so there's a handful of different spots where we've been wanting to garden and get some different plants and vegetables and stuff growing. So we're going to start working some of that stuff over. And then the next part of that, and this is all kind of like one chore faction, is just moving the pigs and cleaning out the winter quarters. And then my goal is to get some wood chips. So the guys that run like the chipping crews on the side of the road where they're cutting, branches off power lines, chip everything up, and they throw it into the big truck. I want to see if I can get one of those guys to bring their load of chips by. And then once I have the pigs out of the barn, do a scrape down to at least get the top soft layer of manure, mud, etc. out of there, then layer a good 6 to 8 inches of chips and then let that all dry out throughout the summer. And then next year in the fall and winter, start layering hay on top of that and have a deeper and more compostable bed as a basin. And what that's going to do, theoretically, and some of you guys may have tried some of this stuff, my understanding is that this is an established thing, that this is definitely not an idea that I've created or thought of. It's was it the Korean deep bedding system, KDP, something like that. And there's videos about this on YouTube. And basically layer it out. And what happens is when you have the wood chips, it kind of creates a little bit of an insulation where the mud is, you're above the mud. And so when the pigs pee, it's not all sitting there in a puddle. It kind of is diffused a little bit, and then it can evaporate a little bit easier. You have more airflow coming through, and then all of that combines to give you better breakdown of the organic material. So it smells a little bit less, composts a little bit better, hopefully looks a little bit better. I mean, that's the goal. And then also next spring, when the soil softens up again, we have a little bit of cushion there, because we're not just going to have water and mud coming straight up. We're going to have a layer of chips that's deep enough to absorb some of that, and so it'll be hopefully a little bit better, a little bit cleaner. Even if it's not, we'll be building soil and compost though by doing that and giving the pigs a nice clean bed to come back to in the fall. And we'll see. It's an experiment that I am doing. And then on the flip side of the same chore, kind of the cleaning out the winter quarters, but for the pasture pigs, they are down there in the best part of the pasture in the porta huts, living their best life. And I am waiting for a shipment of cereal rye and hairy vetch and a couple other things. I'm not quite, probably like the first week of April, I think it should be warm enough to be able to plant. And I am definitely by no means a seasoned pasture manager. Planting things is not something. Basically, I just throw seeds out there and hope that, I mean, about as refined as I have gotten with the planting part of things is, I know that I want to plant either right before or just after the rain, and I know that I want the pigs to have a little bit of time after I plant the seeds and the ground has been softened by the rain. I want the pigs to be on there long enough to kind of stomp some of the seeds into the ground to get good seed soil contact. And then before everything really starts to shoot up and get green, I want to move them off so they kind of plant and stomp. And then once that's done, move them off so it has room to grow. And then once everything is about 3 inches or so long, then I'm going to start bringing the pigs back in. And one of the things I'm exploring in a video that I'm working on, I say this every week. This week was real busy, didn't have time to do much editing. So of course, the last video that I released, I didn't release any like actual edited videos on the channel, which I like the live streams because they allow us an opportunity. Am I out of? Yeah, I probably am. How's that? That better? Yeah, I was probably leaning a little bit too much to the middle. Let me stay over here. Thank you, Rob. Good catch. Basically, what I am going to be doing here, I just completely lost my train of thought because thinking about the camera. Okay, well, oh, that's what I was saying. Yeah, with the video that I've been working on, I'm comparing the pasture-based system for with the porta huts to the barn. And one of the big things that really has come home to me in the process of making this video is how much easier everything is in terms of like the management and the cleanup, because as you just heard me describe, it's going to be a decent amount of goofing around to get the barn straightened out to make that good to go for next year. And I'm happy to do it because the barn definitely has its place, but there's a lot of legwork involved. And like Secret Noise Picture said, wood chips are hard to get a hold of around here. I know in my area too. Like I know actually the guy who I'm getting the piglets from, who watched the farm, who's breeding the pigs that I gave him, he actually works on a tree crew. And so I've been kind of going back and forth with him for the last year or so, trying to get a truck to come out. Last year it didn't work out. So this year I'm, fingers crossed. But the other thing I'm going to start doing also is like talk to people around that do landscaping anybody that's got, grass clippings, leaves, the whole nine, like just whatever it is, layer it on there nice and thick, and the pigs will stomp it down, and it'll have a similar effect in the long run. Um, Bolino's Bounty says, I have the opposite problem. The previous owner used the property for logging, so you have a lot of wood chips. Very good. Yeah, I know you got to be, and I'm not at, Rob actually knows more about this stuff because Rob is a permaculture guru of sorts. And so he's studied this stuff a lot more than I have. And actually, hopefully, Rob may get up here at some point. If you can, that would be really cool. And maybe we'll do a live stream with Rob on the stream as well. You guys can get to know him a little bit. But he's got some, I would call it, higher level assessments and plans for my property in terms of the permaculture with like hugelkultur beds and basically burying logs and swales and making the water go, where my ability to anticipate those things is let's say elementary, to be polite about it. I have a general idea of, you know, I did this for 5 years and now this is worse. Let me do something different. Or this looks nice. Why is this working? And being able to kind of reverse engineer some of that stuff. But hopefully, and I'm not this isn't a permaculture channel, but the concept of making your land and your animals work together for you so you can spend less of your time playing grab ass with the animals and with nature to make, to work against it when time and money and other resources are limited. Hey, like, what could be better than getting everything to work together on your behalf? So that's kind of, I'm going to be doing some experiments with some of that, and hopefully we'll have a chance to bring some of that to you and share it. But the whole thing with cleanup after the winter on the pasture, and I mean, this may seem like very obvious, but the everything is so dispersed because the animals are a little bit more, they're forced out into the elements, except for when it's like bitter cold or there's an active blizzard going on. The pigs don't just sit in the shelters. They go out and they go cruising through the snow. And of course, the downside there is that the pigs are expending more calories, and so potentially, in order to keep them gaining, if you're fattening them up, you're going to have to feed them a little bit heavier in order to get them to put weight on. Or the way I would look at it, they're kind of doing a maintaining phase or a cutting phase until they get to the warmer weather, and then you hit them with, you finish them a little bit harder and up the calories and the carbs and stuff, and then you can kind of make up for some of that at the end. You don't want to be finishing pigs in the winter because they're going to be expending energy. Although it probably comes out about the same either way. It's like, pay me now or pay me later. But having the pigs out there on the pasture, they're dispersing a lot of the waste and a lot of the impact, so that by this time when the snow all melts, instead of having to scrape together all this concentrated manure, put it in a pile, age it for 3 months, and let it kind of cure and get ready to where it's not quite so hot, so that I can put it out on a field or a garden, or turn it into some sort of useful crop. The pigs have already kind of done a lot of that legwork by just putting the fertilizer down of their own accord throughout the winter, and then the snow melts and kind of rinses everything out, and everything is nicely cured and ready to go. And pretty much like they've dug up the pasture as well. And so I can almost, once my seeds are ready, I can pretty much go down and plant the pasture anytime I want. All I got to do is just time it right so that it coincides with some rain, softens the ground up, give the pigs a couple of days to stomp everything in, off they go. And then when it sprouts, bring them back. And but I've just been blown away at how much simpler it is to manage everything with the porta huts versus the barn. And there's definitely some days where I'm glad to have the barn, but there's also some days where and I've used both in parallel. I've used both that with about half of my herd, 20 like 4 to 6 month old breeding stock out in the pasture across 2 porta huts, and then 10 adults, well, maybe 12 adults up in the barn. And it's like it's incredible. There's a lot of pros and cons, and I'm very torn on it, but I feel like I am leaning more in the direction of no barn is actually easier in the long run if you kind of lean into it in some ways. Having a barn like to store feed and all that stuff, that's definitely advantageous. But just for the animal's sake, boy, the pasture side of things, like there's so much more where they can fend for themselves and do for themselves without having to wait for you to bring or provide or set something up for them. They just, you give them the raw ingredients and they make it happen for you, and they do a lot of the work. And so many of the mornings when I'm going down there to feed, I was struck by the fact that like I spend an hour in the barn and then I spend 15 minutes on the pasture to do the same basic tasks, which is just feed. And it's just a tremendous difference in the time. And then the next thing that I'm going to be doing is really going into the farrowing aspect of that to see if how the farrowing on the pasture really compares to farrowing in the barn, and if that same general principle will hold true for the mamas out on the pasture versus in the barn. But I don't see how it wouldn't, because it seems like, you know, there's pros and cons to everything certainly, but you kind of have to pick your lane and then stick to it, you know. And I've been in between for a bit, and I'm kind of making my decision as I'm going along. Hopping in the chat here, Secret Noise says the only way I've been able to get wood chips is to talk to the guy who processes firewood in town. $50, he brings me a truckload. Rob says if you plant a few different types of clover on 4 to 8 inches of chips, 3 years or less in a 7-8 climate, you'll be stoked. Not that long. Well, I think we're, and Rob, I'm assuming you're talking about the growing zone. I think we're like 4. Our growing zone is 4. But I might be speaking out of pocket here. All right. So far we've opened up the woods. We've done a little bit of logging, right? That we've talked about it. So it's as good as done here in terms of our chore list. Moving the pigs and getting them out of the winter quarters, out of the way, so that we can really have clear access to clean stuff up. And then the next thing is going to be tuning up the fences. And like I mentioned earlier, for me at least, and your mileage may vary, but I have been very fortunate that the pigs don't really get too excited about trying to knock over fences and test their limits and go exploring in the wintertime. Typically in the wintertime, they want to either lay low, spend as little energy as possible, and then go back to the piggy pile unless they're, you know, hungry or thirsty. Pretty much they're not out there testing the fences. But as soon as that snow starts to melt, and I'm sure there's better ways of doing this. Right now I use aluminum electric fence wire because it's easy to handle, easy to manipulate. You don't need a lot of special tools or connectors. You have a pair of lineman's pliers to clip everything as needed, and then you just twist it pretty much by hand. And it's more conductive than galvanized. And galvanized is definitely stronger and cheaper, but it's also a lot heavier and a lot more difficult to work with. And even with like dirt clods grounding out the fence, with weeds growing up, as you know, that's going to happen in the springtime, I can still pretty consistently get 6 to 7,000 volts going through an aluminum wire. And so it kind of maintains itself to a certain extent. Now, uh, I still want to work on it to improve it a little bit. This year, I bought some heavier gauged aluminum wire to try to make my fences a little bit more permanent. Because what I did, the electric fences that I currently have they were cobbled together. So they started out with, okay, I'm going to put some fencing here. Okay, now I'm going to cut this and splice that in, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to make it bigger yet. I'm going to make it bigger still. We're going to run a line up there. It's a little bit piecemealed, and as a result, some of the wire I got was heavier, some of it was lighter, some of it comes apart, some of it doesn't really get tested by the pigs, and I'm not even sure why I still have it there. And other parts of it, it's just like in a really bad position, or that, like, there's things that need changes that need to be made to the electric fence setup. And so now that the weeds are down and I don't have to worry about that, because once the weeds start growing, then it becomes a bigger pain to get everything in place. So I want to do it now while the lines are still clear. And I want to make sure that I fix some of the mistakes in the ways that I put my electric fences in when I originally put them, where my bottom lines, I run 2 lines most of the time, even though practically speaking, one would be good enough. I have like an adult line that's maybe 18 inches off the ground, and then the uh, adolescent piglet sized line that's about 6 to 8 inches off the ground. And what I found is that lower line, that you got to bring it a little bit higher than what you think, because weeds grow up real quick and clods get tossed onto those wires, and the pigs are growing. And so the time where it's really going to be at nose level for that bottom wire, you have to kind of lead them a little bit and give a little bit more height in that bottom wire. Makes it way easier to maintain, because when that bottom wire is too close to the ground and you're going around there and you're trying to weed whack in the summertime and clear the weeds off of the line, it's always like getting tangled in the wire and ripping the wire off and breaking it. So I got to put some of those bottom wires, lift them up a little bit, and kind of fix that, and then re-spool everything with heavier. I think I got 12 gauge, maybe it was 10. I got the heaviest gauge aluminum wire that I could find, and I paid a pretty penny for it, but that stuff is super easy to work with. And like I said, I believe it's 3 times more conductive. Mr. Um, Lightfoot might be able to speak to this, because he knows more about electrical stuff, obviously, than I do. But I believe it's 3 times more conductive. And with a good hot fence charger, I want to be able to, like, I come out there in the morning, I find dead snakes, dead frogs, dead rodents on those electric fence wires. I want those things to be uh, I want to be those wires to cook. Minimum of 5,000 volts. Like right now, I'm sitting a little over 5,000 volts, and first thing in the spring, I can live with that, because it's enough to discourage the pigs. But I want to get those lines tight, well connected, everything stood up where it needs to be. I gotta reroute some sections of the pasture, because I believe I mentioned on my last stream, the rodents really went to town on my erstwhile orchard. And Rob, I think, said that I put the orchard in a really dumb spot to begin with, anyways. So they might have been doing me a favor. I know I have some Jerusalem artichokes in there, which I've done a little bit of reading. They have a decent amount of carbs. Pigs like them. So I'm going to kind of change the fence so that the pigs are going to be allowed into the section where the Jerusalem artichokes are, and let them play with those, see what they can accomplish there, and if that does anything in terms of the forage. And then, you know, get the fences nice and hot so we can keep the pigs where we want them, and then just be able to move. Because if I can get a good perimeter, like a good permanent perimeter, which I kind of got close to it, but it was very cobbled together, I need to go back over it and really do a good fix on the perimeter fence. And once that's done, then the cross sections where, you know, I just have like the poly wire on a roll, those are going to be easier to, you know, move and put in and out, because the perimeter fence will be plenty hot enough that it'll keep the poly wire hot enough to keep the pigs where they need to be. And if pigs jump the wire here and there and they go from one paddock to another, I'm not super worried about that. As the thing I'm more concerned about is if I have like boars and sows that are cross pollinating where I don't really want them interacting or something of that nature. That's where it can be a little bit more squirrely. But I'm, uh, you know, at majority of what I need my fence to do is keep the pigs in the perimeter, and then the secondary functions, of course, to keep them separated and organized as they move and do some rotational grazing, which we'll see how that goes. And as the upstairs gets opened up, the part on the hill, the 5 acres, the half of my property that's up the hill, as that gets more opened up over the coming years, that adds more optionality to my rotation, where it's not just like a rectangle and I have to kind of move them across the field in little dribs and drabs, which I'm happy to do that. I mean, stuff grows fast enough, and as long as it's kind of regrown, you give it a little bit of a break, a week or two. A lot of the cover crops, and I'm just going behind and replanting anyways, it's relatively cheap seed, most of what I'm planting. Um, you know, clover isn't cheap, but buckwheat is cheap, and cereal rye is cheap, and oats cheap, field peas, that stuff is decently cheap. And so that's kind of getting the fences tuned up is something that will help me to sleep a little bit better at night, I hope, because I have nightmares about it, you know. All right, getting down to the wire here. Well, and then the last, and I kind of actually started talking about this just a moment ago, um, just getting the cover crops in, and yeah, getting the cover crops in so that we can start the rotation. Because what has happened to me a lot in the past is it's too muddy, or I can't move the pigs in enough time. Like it's too muddy here, and so I have to keep the pigs over here, and I get kind of jammed up with the pigs and not being able to move them quickly enough in order to get the planting done. And so I've got in a good stand of clover established in the pasture. At least every year, it always seems to keep coming back. And the pigs have done a good job really disturbing the soil in some of the other parts of the pasture that were a little bit more hardened. I have a good scare quotes mix of cover crops, and I may have some of the seasonality wrong on these, but the first ones that I have going in, which probably will be in 2 to 3 weeks, I think, assuming that the seeds come in. I have cereal rye is the main one. I have some, I believe it's winter peas or field peas going in there. Hairy vetch. I'm going to be putting in as well. And then kind of the next from there will be some alfalfa, some clover. And then as we go into the like May, June, then, and comfrey is an interesting one. I have to look at comfrey. I have not seen that or put that into any of my mixes, but I'm always interested in adding new things into the mix and to see how it plays. I really, really love buckwheat. I love buckwheat. It's cheap, it's easy, and it's got a pile of lysine in there, and the pigs love it, and it's kind of good for everything that we're doing. I also have a real nice mix of turnips that are going to be going in as well to kind of break up some of the soil and also give the pigs something to root around and to do. I have soy and canola, otherwise known as rapeseed, and the canola plant has again it's got a lot of lysine and it's got a lot of good nutrients in there. Um, Northern Lightfoot says, sorry, a little bit behind. I think Polywire advertises 10x. Okay, so yeah, that's a decent amount. Like it's a trade-off because like what you gain in conductivity, you lose in durability, and so you might have to do some checking and patching here and there, but it'll hit pretty hard, and especially if you're using a fence charger that maybe isn't as strong. I got to get a sponsorship deal with Cyclops because their fence chargers are monumental. Their fence chargers are just ghastly. I mean, they hit real hard, and that brings almost brings a tear to my eye. I mean, literally brings a tear to my eye when I'm walking around there with the weed trimmer and I turn around and I'm not paying attention and run the weed trimmer into the electric fence. And then, I start to thrutch and twitch on the ground. But it makes me very confident in the ability of my charger to manage the pigs, and you sleep better at night knowing that you have a real heavy duty charger at work for you. Um, yeah, and back to the cover crop mix. One of the things that I dabble with a little bit, um, that I kind of go back and forth because I have a schedule of like what I want to plant when, but if I have a plant that's doing well and it's green, I have a hard time just like destroying it to plant, like kind of wipe the board and plant something else in its place. When it's like, well, if it's doing good, like I'm going to let it roll. I'm not going to kill it and put something else in there. I would like to time it so that I can get some sunflowers in the mix and bring some. And I have wildflowers in the mix as well. Although a lot of the wildflowers I'm putting onto areas outside of where the pigs are, just for because I don't know how much nutritional value the wildflowers are going to bring, other than obviously like um, I know like hairy vetch and some of those. I'm trying to think of the name of trefoil, I think it's called, and obviously the clovers, but the sunflowers. Um, take care, Rob. Look out for the Nightman there. Uh, yeah, the sunflowers. I just went buck wild a couple years ago with sunflowers. Just got like a 40-pound bag from Runnings for like $18 and just spread that all over the field. We had sunflowers galore, and the birds just loved it. Um, oh, cool! Lightfoot is getting a Cyclops charger. Well, let me know. Let me know how you like that thing. I definitely don't have the biggest one. I got the biggest one I could afford, but it was much bigger than the biggest one I could find at Tractor Supply. Because the biggest one I could find at Tractor Supply, I think, was like 6 joules or something like that. So the one I got is like 16, and it it, I mean, obviously the grounding has to be up to speed and in a nice wet area, but when you have that much power coming out of a charger, it makes up for, it's very forgiving when you have to also factor in things like weeds growing over it, or a branch falls on top of it, or something gets in the way. Like, there's still enough juice in the wire to take care of business, and that makes life better in my experience. And the pigs, it doesn't do the pigs any harm. They learn, and then they figure it out, and they'll stay away from it for the most part. And that's one of the things I'm concerned about, where this time of year, when the fences are still kind of in suboptimal shape from the winter, that I don't want the pigs getting trained to the fences being weak and then getting in the habit of thinking that it's appropriate for them to challenge the fence, because then the more they do that, that's just cultivating a bad habit that's going to become a problem, and I don't want to have to deal with that down the road. So getting the fence is tuned up is going to be a big part of what we're doing. There was a 535-pound bear taken this past fall that ran down my driveway. Wow. Well, 40 joules ought to do it, I would think. Is that the one that you're thinking about getting? I would be curious. I mean, curious in a manner of speaking, in terms of like what 40 joules would feel like. I know 16 joules feels incredibly unpleasant. Just really bad. Like, it's surprisingly bad. Like, it's not just that it hurts, it's like surprisingly painful and surprisingly just awful, especially when the times I've gotten shocked, I've had like, I was loading pigs and I grabbed the gate, and somehow the gate came around, and I put my other hand, I was looking over the one direction, and I had both hands on the gate, and I opened the gate too far and it hit the electric fence. And of course, both hands on the electricity went one hand to the other and went straight through the middle of my body. And it felt like somebody hit me over the head with a baseball bat. It was just like, I was blown away. It was not fun, but I would imagine that a 40 joule charge would be enough to discourage a bear, I would hope. Although, still may depend on where and how. Uh, yeah, 40. I mean, it's never bad to have a little excess when you're talking about power, because there's always, you got to factor Murphy's Law into everything that we're planning for all of this stuff. And I think bigger is going to be better. It's like, when I know a lot of people like the solar chargers, and I mean no harm in castigating the solar chargers. I have one myself. I still have it in its packaging, and I've never taken it out because it's like 0.5 joules, and I'm like, what am I going to do with that? Like, I just don't have any confidence in 0.5 joules. I want something that's going to just hotter and scarier and just worse. I want to ruin somebody's day if they run into that thing. Like, it's got to be, and again, for their own benefit, because they hit it once and they learn, and that's it. Don't want to have, uh, you know, don't want a fence charger that's going to allow thought process of, well, maybe next time, we'll see how it goes next time. You want a fence charger that's going to get the point across in one go, where it's like, yeah, not a good idea. 0 out of 10, would not recommend, go the other way. And for the adults, like my adult pigs, for the most part, I'm actually debating putting a neck over line on. I have some field fencing in the middle, where that's kind of like the big divider between my like younger herd, my Berkshire herd, and then my grown-up herd that's mostly tams, a couple of old spots, and one Burke. And they've kind of figured out that the fencing is not really well installed. You know, it's T-posts with the wires twisted around it, and it's good enough for government work, but end of the day, the pigs want to, they just kind of like put their chin over and then they throw an arm over and the fence just kind of crumples down and it slides down on the T-post and they can work their way over the fence if they really have a mind to do it. And so I got to put a neck over line on that to, I'm debating it, to discourage them. I mean, it's not that much work, and it would kind of serve them right so they understand not to, the FAFO, as it were. Secret Noise Picture says, I can't stand solar chargers. I have a 5 joule charger that has gotten us by for now, but I want to upgrade. Do it. I'm telling you, it's when you spend the money, it hurts. But once you have a bigger, hotter charger, I'm telling you, you'll sleep better at night. You'll sleep better at night. It's just, it's beautiful. When you walk out there in the morning and you hear the birds singing and you see like a frog burnt to a crisp on the bottom wire of the fence, and you're like, yes, this is superior power. This is like, this is the show of force that we need for the pigs. It feels good. It feels good. You won't regret it. It's a very good purchase. I love the concept of a solar charger. It's only in practice that I have been not super impressed. So that is the basic nuts and bolts of my spring chores. Um, I do have, and I'm kind of lumping this in with spring chores because it is a chore and it does have to be done in the spring, but it also has to be done in the summer and the fall. I got some piglets, they got to get weaned, and I got castration that needs to happen for some of those piglets. Although I've been really thankful that I've gotten more people interested in buying breed stock from me. And breed stock goes for a prettier penny. So I am hoping to make up some of the losses from the feeder piglets in the spring through selling breed stock at a slightly higher rate, and pick of the litter type of stuff. So there's a limited amount of breed stock that I can sell in good conscience, but to be able to sell those, to hopefully generate a little extra cash to get us caught up. So that is encouraging. As well as we are having a class, and like literally half of you guys in the chat right now have been to these classes already. But we're having another class on April 10th for Homestead Pigs 101. If anybody is watching and is interested in coming to our farm on the 10th of April, and kind of walking around, and we'll go through all the nuts and bolts and make a day of it. We enjoy being able to do that and also meet new people, build a little bit of community. So we're excited about that. Working on an ebook version of kind of that class syllabus, but fleshed out a little bit more, kind of like a starter guide for somebody raising pigs, stuff to refer to, nuts and bolts. And of course, I can always tune it up and add stuff as it goes along, but I'm making that an ongoing project, so that when folks sign up for the email list, they'll automatically receive that free guide to getting started with pigs. And as people make suggestions, as we learn stuff, as people complain and tell me that they want their money back for the free email thing that they got, I can always edit it and tune it up and make something that's a good, concise kind of starter manual for somebody getting into pigs on a shoestring and getting into farming. And also going to be working on a video version of the course as well. I'm excited about that, so that people who aren't able to travel out here can buy the video version of the course and take their time and work their way through it. But that's going to take a little bit longer to put some production into and really make it robust, so that you can really get the full value out of doing that. Lightfoot says, I'll train the pigs with a smaller charger, but it's not pigs that I worry about. Yeah, I gotcha. I have a separate charger for my wiener pen that is actually one of the first chargers that I bought. It's only a 3 joule charger, and that's what I use in the wiener pen. That's great. It's also a very small area, so bang for buck, it's got a pretty good conversion rate between joules and relative suffering that is conveyed. And also there's like not really much growth weed wise, or like branches to fall off, so it's pretty unobstructed. So I use a smaller charger for that. I think that's a good idea. Nobody has claimed the Burke barrows yet. I was, well, I'm not close to possibly letting one or two of them go. I was going to sell them as like whole hog, half or whole, just like send them to the freezer basically, and get my money back that way. But I would be open to a discussion about them at some point if that was something that you wanted to follow up on. We could do that as well. So it's once it dries out a little bit better and it's easier to load and unload. I got one of my spring chores that I need to do as well. I got just trash that needs to be cleaned up, and that's probably like my entire year's worth of work, is just cleaning up crap, because so many times it's like things fall off of trees, or you got to leave this here, and it's like I'll get that later, and later never comes because you're doing in the middle of something else. And actually spending a couple of days and really just like cleaning up, getting rid of downed branches and trash disposal. And I had a company, some folks from a company that found me online, and they had some expired ice cream. I made a short about this. I made a short about this. They brought a bunch of ice cream because like their cooler went down or their freezer went down, and so their ice cream was above temperature for too long. And so the USDA is like, thou shalt not sell this ice cream, which I thought was ridiculous. But whatever. You all know what I think about the USDA, anyways. So they brought like an entire van load of ice cream, and I had it sitting out there for the pigs, and I would feed it with their food. They enjoyed it. I worked around it. It was a little bit messy, but basically I created a pile out of all of the empties. These, like, I guess, gallon tubs of ice cream, cylindrical containers. And so there's like this pile of empties, and then there's the pile that it was just way too damn cold and it was frozen solid. So there wasn't really a simple way for me to work around that, is I'm not going to like open it up with my gloves on and then try to throw it in the, I'm sure I could have done it, but it just, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze for me. I just wanted to dump the buckets and get going through the winter when we had that real cold spot that came through. So there's still like about 25% of those containers of ice cream that have melted, spoiled ice cream. So I got to clean those up as well, in addition to the empties. So other stuff that remains on my list of things to do. And of course, in the meantime, we got babies coming and mamas that need to get bred again, and so all that stuff's going to be happening as per usual. Northern Lightfoot says barrows are probably way past feeder size. now. Anyhow, yeah, they're 150 pounds on the light side. Like the smallest one is maybe 150, 165. The bigger ones maybe 100 and set. There's one of them who he's just like he's stacked. He's a big boy, and he's good looking, good looking pig. I mean, he's a little too much. You know, he's a little bit too thick to for what I would be looking for in a boar. And my boar's coming along. He's very lean and long. He's very athletic, and I like him. He's kind of a dingus. He finds a way. I don't know how, but he's managed to get through my electric fence to get up to because like I have a so the buffer dividing the big pigs from the little pigs. There's big pigs. I'm trying to get this here. Okay, we got big pigs, field fencing, and then an empty paddock, electric, and then little pigs. And he gets through the electric and comes up to the field fencing. And he can actually, he found a way. There's like a little runoff, and he can go underneath like the field fencing. Under in that like little runoff thing, he'll squeeze through there and he'll just go visit and hang out with the big pigs. And then after he's done hanging out with them, he goes back under and goes back to the little pigs, but he can't get through the electric going the other way. He can get through the electric, no problem, coming towards the big pigs, but he can't get through the electric going the other way. And so every time he does that, I have to unplug the charger, go out there, do the thing so that he doesn't, because I don't want him to get trained to going through the electric fence. So I got to unplug it, disconnect everything, and like unhook the gate and, you know, let him go. He's such a pain in the butt, but I love him. He's a precious little fella. Yeah, I would. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the Burke spot crosses are like, and I definitely will let you know when we're going to have some of those because I'm debating how I want to do that. I might put one of my. I have a spot sow, and maybe I'll put her down there with my Burke boar and let those two make some piglets for me because I'm very curious to see an old spot Berkshire cross. I have not seen those. I like the black and white because it's neat. I like the coloring. Um, I'm you know, a lot of this is the technical analysis that goes into my breeding. It's like, huh, what would that look like? I bet that would be cool. I like the way that could look cool. Maybe I'll do that. That's kind of where I'm at this point. Although obviously the maternal and the carcass qualities, all of that stuff, that's all important. But yeah, um, yeah, they're good looking babies. All right, yeah. Your Burt Gilts were awesome. I think you bought them from someone who thought yes. I got the majority of my Burks. I got them from Mike Stevens, who I didn't see him check in tonight, although he may be one of the few and the proud in the audience. Um, but yeah, I also got 3 gilts, although I think that the one in the pond was one of the ones that I got from a guy named Bill Duffy in Northern Mass. I think one of those might be his, um, because his were bigger at the time that I actually brought them home. And given the size of that female that I found in the pond, like she was big in the fall when she went in, presumably. So, um, but yeah, I've got a good number. I've got a good number of Burks, and I'm looking forward to seeing the crosses that they make. And I kept, of course, some of my Tam Burke crosses, and I want to cross them with my purebred old spot boar. So get a 3-way maximum hybrid vigor and get all the different qualities that between the old spot Tam and the Berkshire and put those together and see what we can come up with. So we got a lot of work and testing to do, and I'm excited for it because I enjoy it and you get to eat your mistakes. Um, yeah, the Burke boar, I'm excited to see what he can do. I think he's got some real good potential. The Burke crossed with Duroc or Spots only care about the first gen hybrids. Yeah, the well, I'm kind of look from a terminal, like the meat crosses or the meat breeding that I'm looking to do. If I can get the three-way cross, that's kind of the finishing touch to put on things. But we'll see. I mean, I have some of the uh, Tam Berkshire first gen hybrids, and I got two of those that are going to be going to the freezer. One is going to my buddy Kent to put in my cool bot for me. So this summer, we're gonna do a little butchering and play with some of that stuff. But I'm really curious to see what those carcasses look like, and give them a little bit of time up in the woods to forage and see where that goes. Very exciting. It's good stuff. I'm looking forward to it. So, anyways, guys, we're about an hour and 26 in. Um, I am interested and curious to hear if you guys have anything that you all want to talk about, questions, comments, concerns, video topics, recommendations, things you like, things you don't like. Give it your best shot. I'm all ears, and we can kind of kick it around and wind towards a conclusion at this point. Blue Wagon Farm says our young boar is a Burke Duroc. His predecessor was the same cross, but not related. The sow and gilt are Hereford Duroc. The first two litters have looked good. I feel like I've seen a decent amount of Burke Duroc crosses. That sounds like a very well proportioned growing pig that's going to grow. Of course, anything with Duroc. Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting cross. I don't really have. There's two like main breeds, and maybe I should play with them just to kind of see what the fuss is about, so that I could say that I've raised them. Hampshires and Herefords. I haven't really played with Hamps or Herefords. Heard good things and bad things about both, as is the case with any breed. There's always like, you know, people that love them, people that hate them. But yeah, I've I've got the thing is I've got work to do, because in terms of just breeds that I want to preserve and improve, the Tamworth would be my focus. So if I'm not like doing anything else but just trying to build a breed and trying to improve a breed, the Tamworth are a breed that I want to build and improve. And I'm really excited about the stock that I have from the Tams, because I got from a gentleman in New York some UK derivative Tams that are purebred. I got the mama, the blonde one, the blonde Tam, and then the two little chocolate Tams. And then of course I have the original Tams that I have. So you got a bunch of different strains of Tamworth genetics there. And the blonde mama that I got, she was bred by a completely unrelated boar to mine. So out of her, I want to get uh, basically get some genetics out of, keep at least one boar out of her to kind of swap over. And then my existing big boar, my Tam, to breed the blonde mama and the two chocolate tams, and kind of get some, see what we can shuffle the deck a little bit, see what we can come up with. But I got a lot of different Tamworth genetics to be able to play with. And the funny thing is, this spring, I have had so many people messaging me, I'm looking for purebred Tams. It's like, really? Great. I mean, I'm happy about that because there are not a lot of purebred Tams, and kind of the next phase of things here are going to be going into registration and registering my herds, because like my sires are all registered, but I don't register the females and register all the litters, because to me, the idea of registration is really only useful if you're selling breed stock to another breeder. If you're selling breed stock to a, like, and I'm not saying this to be smug, but like if you're selling breed stock to a homesteader or a small farmer, they're breeding the animals because they're quality and they like the breed, but they're not breeding the animals to make breed stock to sell to other breeders. And so the registration kind of is a moot point. If you get good breed stock that make good babies, then they'll kind of mix and match, and they'll just kind of keep putting them together with whatever outside genetics, but they're not necessarily trying to cultivate a specific bloodline. They're trying to get, good terminal crosses or terminal purebreds so that they can have that. But if you're selling it to a breeder, then a breeder is going to want to be able to look at the genetics and say, oh, okay, well, this sire came from this genetic lineage, and based on that, I'm going to select, a sow for him to breed so that I can get these types of pigs and yada yada. So that is something that I am looking at doing, and hopefully at some point I will become responsible and motivated enough to do that. But right now, doing paperwork, it just chaps my ass and I hate it. So I just don't have the bandwidth, frankly, to do that. But one of these days, if and when I'm able to go something closer to full time with the farming, that is going to be one of the first things I'm going to do. Because if nothing else, registered animals is like a feather in your cap, especially in this part of the country where it is very hard to find purebred genetics, because everybody just kind of plays, this half-assed, oh, well, we got a pig over here and we put them together and they made babies. We don't have that much time because we got to get our pigs off, into the freezer by October 31st. Otherwise, they're going to turn into a pumpkin. And nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but there's not a lot of farmers in this part of the country that actually take genetics seriously and are really trying to improve the animals that they're breeding. It's more a matter of, oh, that looks good, let's see what that'll make, and then we're just going to kind of go about our business. There's not like thought about future generations and kind of tailoring and building and improving. And I really want to be able to put a flag in the ground to be able to say, no, what we're doing here is different because we care about the future of these breeds. And it is an ethical issue that I struggle with a little bit, because as a breeder, I believe that it is my responsibility, and one that I am kind of shirking. So I'm not proud of myself in this capacity, but it is the responsibility of a good breeder to improve the breed and to stabilize and to distill the genetics and to like leave the breed stronger for having come through your care and your husbandry, that you're not allowing subpar genetics from that breed to go out and reproduce, that you are giving the best of the best and you're limiting to the best of the best coming out to other people, not just like, oh, he'll pay me a couple $100 for a breeder, here, good enough, take it, it's all red and it's got pointy ears, it's fine. But rather to be a little bit more selective and to be more demanding and rigorous in the standards that we uphold. And so I have to uphold myself, or I have to hold myself to that same standard in doing the registration and the paperwork, which allows other people to have the confidence and to be able to see that I am being meticulous and detailed, which very few elements of my life are meticulous and detailed, although there is a lot of, like, it's just right now, it's just all in my head. But I am reaching a point where, and it's ironic because Secret Noise Pictures asked about, apps for keeping track of stuff and specifically for bookkeeping. And right now, like, as I get all of these females now, this, like, kind of my younger herd of young Berks and the two little chocolate Tams that I have down in the pasture, that younger herd, as they start to become productive, it's gonna reach critical mass to where I cannot keep it all in my head. I'm going to have to start notching ears. I'm going to have to start keeping track. And it's going to force me to actually, start farming like a responsible adult instead of, a ratchet hillbilly, which, well, here we are. And I will be sure to stumble through that process in a shameful and public fashion so that you guys can all benefit from it. Reading back in the chat, Blue Wagon Farm says we could have ordered registered Pures, but it didn't go that way. We found some good cross stock coming from good farms, and they're working out so far. Blue Wagon says maybe in the future we'll branch out, but right now the focus is providing quality meat pig to beef-minded consumer. That's a very succinct, and that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like that. Well, the ironic thing here, because I see Lightfoot talking Blue Wagon about the Herefords, like they have similar, I believe, like similar colors. Like they both are red, red with white faces, and that's the same thing with the pigs and with the cows, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's. I mean, that's the nice thing about kind of when you're starting out. You can just get one or two and just try them out and see what you think. The downside is that if you're in New England and you want to try the different breeds, good luck finding anything in New Hampshire. I mean, New York surprisingly has a pretty decent selection of, like, I believe the Duroc came from like the Finger Lakes region in New York State, where they originated, or the farms on which they originated, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody can fact check me on that, but yeah, I think, kind of to your point though, Blue Wagon, about the crosses, I think that the breeding is much more significant than the breed, because the breed just gives you a set of characteristics. It's not a guaranteed level of quality. The level of quality comes out with the way that it is bred, and the selection and the repetition and the thought process that's put into that. The one downside with that, or the challenge, I guess, is that it requires a lot of, like, follow up to be able to then go back and say, oh, okay, like, I got to look at the carcass from these two parents. That carcass really wasn't anything to write home about. Let's send one or both to the freezer of the parents. Or, like, the carcass was good, but we need better mothering qualities, or what have you. Like, there's a lot of those variables, but you have to kind of keep track over generations to really be able to have proven quality, where it's like, okay, I know that selecting from this cross between these two pigs gave me babies that pretty universally all conformed to the same, let's say, I mean, because we're talking about meat quality, the same carcass quality that we want, and we got good conformity. And so we know that, like, we're on to something, we've hit something here, and we're gonna kind of can continue to work with that, and then you've got that proven quality that you can come back to the well as needed. And crosses, I mean, I think that one of the things I was thinking about was doing a like a tier list of different breeds, and for the vast majority of people, like a good cross is going to be the best option. It's the best option because like crossed boars throw something like 20% bigger litters than purebred boars. And I mean, it like the growth is faster. I mean, there's so many benefits to using a good vigorous crossed animal that, you know, I have some people that get a hold of me when it's time for piglets and they really have their heart set on a purebred this or that, and it's like, if you're going to eat them, having a cross is not a lesser piglet. Having a cross is actually the culmination of the best qualities of both parents that are purebreds. The problem is a lot of people in this area, they don't invest in the purebred stock to be able to make the F1 crosses. They just kind of cross the crosses and then cross the children of the crosses, and it's just all crosses, and so that you kind of water it down after a while. So Northern Lightfoot says, my priority is as dark red pork as I can get. I loved it before it was a thing. I don't think I said that before, but now, Stephen, you know, and that's what I am chasing. Interesting. Dark red pork. Yeah, I'm curious. Secret Noise Picture says Harry Kelsey in New York in the 1860s, taking Jersey Reds and a red boar from his farm. Jersey Reds, huh? How about that? Now, where are the Jersey Reds? I need to get some Jersey Reds to put in my herd, and I can be the only Jersey Red breeder, and that's going to be my thing. I'm going to be a Jersey Red breeder. No, I like the red hogs. I do like red hogs. Dark red pork, IPP, yeah. Hey, I've heard good things. I mean, and this is something I know last time we wound up always coming around to the conversation of a like a cookout or taste testing scenario. And we should actually set something up and do like a little cookout here. See if we can get people to come in. Maybe we'll do a raffle and buy plane tickets for some of y'all out in Texas and Oklahoma. Win a flight out here. We can do a GoFundMe or something. But I'm curious to actually compare the different breeds with the meat quality characteristics. And of course, the only way to really do it would be to raise them all under identical circumstances. But like I mentioned, I know I've mentioned this in a handful of streams. Um, huh. Yeah, we get a handful of people here, and you know, everybody can bring a little bit of their pork in, and we can kind of compare recipes. We can compare taste. We can, you know, actually eat some pork and hang out and, you know, drink some whatever people drink. I don't really drink much in the way of alcohol, but you know, would be nice to do that. Yeah, I think we need to start a marketing campaign called Pork the Other Red Meat, because that's really what it should be. And so I've told a version of this story previously, but when I first got into pigs, I bought a breeding pair and I bought 2 cut males. The cut males were going to go to the freezer. The breeding pair were going to make piglets, and that was going to be like the way it went. But I wound up getting more breeders, and I brought in some Durocs right away. So I went from 4 pigs to 6 pigs, and then, you know, on and on it went. And then I wound up getting a couple of Duroc boars, and so yeah, the numbers increased relatively quickly. But as a result of doing that, I didn't get to butcher those 2 first those first two barrows that I got from my very first pigs in 21. I didn't butcher them until 2023. I think it was 23. Um, so it was almost like 2 years or so, and they were huge. They both went through like a couple of winters, and it was kind of like coming up on their third winter that they finally went to the freezer. And I got these pigs. They were genetically literally nothing special. I think the one pig might have had a little bit of Burke, might have had a little bit of Tam. It was like, it looked like the Tam Burke cross, maybe with some Yorkshire in there. And then the other one was like a straight pink pig. It was like Yorkshire, pointy ears, long body. Again, nothing super special. And both of these animals, they were out in the woods and in the doing all kinds of foraging, and they did that for a couple of winters, and boy, their meat was like, it looked like when you saw a picture of it. I've posted pictures of it online without editing and adjustment, any of that, no funny business. And I've had people accuse me of taking pictures of steak like beef. And it's like, no, this is exactly what my pork looks like. I don't know how it happened, because it's not like I could say, oh, I had such, fantastic breed stock that went into this. Like, these were pigs that I bought from, God bless them, group of hippies out in the middle of wherever the heck they were. I forget where their farm was. Like, they were doing kind of a commune, libertarian hippies. So, I mean, whatever. Nice, very nice people. But they were not necessarily the apex of any kind of genetic experimentation. And like, a pink pig is about as basic as you can get for a pig. And I mean, it looked like ribeye when I cut those chops and the shoulder and the whole nine. Like, it was good looking meat, and it tasted amazing. So I am curious how much of the color of the meat is related to the breed versus the diet. And specifically, my estimation is that I think it has to do with the amount of iron in their diet, because the heme iron and hemoglobin, of course, and the more iron rich their diet is, the more their blood is able to carry oxygen. The more oxygenated the meat is, the darker and richer that it looks. Whereas, kind of like if you think of it in the same way that like you get pale when you're fainting and your circulation isn't good, if your circulation is strong and you have ruddy complexion and it's like the blood is there, the blood is very rich and carrying a lot of oxygen, it's going to be red, that dark red color. Again, I'm just kind of spitballing, but Northern Lightfoot says pink pigs equals white meat in my mind. Just not interested. It's $189 a pound and has been my entire adult life. Yeah, I mean, I'm not selling pink pigs. And look, I'm not trying to disabuse anyone of their attachment to the breeds, because like I said, I'm excited about the Old Spot Berkshire crosses because I think they're going to look cool. I mean, I also think that there's going to be very good things that come out of those crosses from a, carcass quality and probably mothering quality as well, maternal and personality traits. I'm very interested, because I feel like, well, I don't know. I always say, there's part of me that wants to say that certain breeds have different dispositions, but it's kind of hard to say. It's not that cut and dry. They all have their own little dispositions and their own ways, but I really like the Burks. They're very what's the word I'm looking for? Unafraid. They're willing to kind of get in your face a little bit and demand. They're very demanding. They want your attention, which is kind of sweet. It's also kind of annoying sometimes, but they're very like, they'll get in your face because they want love. They're not aggressive in your face. They're like, no, love me, scratch my back, give me food, and they're just little attention hoochies. But I do think that, I mean, my broader message to the world at large, since I know that this message is reaching so many people all across the corners of the agricultural community, that like, if I had to choose between a random pig with the most unremarkable genetics on like pasture forage based feed versus the most absolutely buttoned up spectacular genetics on just kind of conventional environment and feed, I think that you would probably be hard pressed to see a significant advantage one over the other, where they could probably like good environment and foraging, I think. And there's a lot of people in conventional pork that would laugh me out of, the room if I said this, but I believe, based on what I've seen, which there's a lot that I haven't seen too, so whatever, sue me, but don't, because I mean, go ahead, it's whatever. But there's a lot to be gained from good feeding and good environmental access to forage that makes up for and will cover. It's kind of like the idea of being able to out train a shitty diet if you're talking about athletics. Like a good diet for pigs can outperform very unremarkable genetics, I think, in a lot of cases. I mean, obviously, both is better, and that's why I have red hogs and white hogs and black hogs. I just don't like the pink pigs. I feel bad for not liking the pink pigs, because like there's a lot of them and they're nice little animals, but it's just not my cup of tea. Um, Blue Wagon Farm says same thing happens to us. Folks here have never seen dark pork. I love educating them, though. That has been a rewarding side effect of this. Yeah, not skittish. Lightfoot says we had Yorks as a kid. They were fine, but if you can get 20 more pounds of dark meat, I'm doing it. Hey, I'm with you. Two breeds dominate the supermarket. The white chops are probably York lineage. The redder, pinker are probably Durocs. Interesting. I don't know. That I don't know. I mean, I've eaten my Duroc boar, and I've processed a Duroc cross. The Duroc cross, from what I can remember, it was pretty dark red. It wasn't like deep red, but it was pretty dark red. But the one thing is that both of the Durocs that I had, they were more on like pasture. They weren't up the hill in the woods. And so they were eating grass, but they were not like digging and rooting nearly as much. And I suspect that the dark color of the meat has to do with the minerals, specifically the iron in the soil, and they're getting a lot of that in their diet beyond what maybe even they need. And my hypothesis, I could be totally wrong about this, but my hypothesis is that it would fade, like if you kind of shift them off of that diet and then process them a month later, even though maybe they grew up foraging in the woods, they're not going to maintain that same color, because it's more of a short-term presence of minerals in their body, and that presentation of it in the musculature, that kind of, as they lose that nutritional density, that concentration of minerals, that the color of the tissue and their call vascularity isn't really what it is, but like the quality of the meat, that might even only be a short-term thing. Um, so I don't know. I don't know exactly what the deal is, like which of the supermarket pigs are our Duroc versus York. But I would be curious to kind of see that put to a test to see if you can actually tell the difference just based on breed. Um, yeah, it is too bad we can't buy acorns by the ton. I got a couple of 5-gallon buckets of them. And that's about as, and that was last year when it was just raining acorns. It was a good year for acorns last year. Secret Noise Picture says the store I work at, our pork is Duroc. I've talked to the buyers. Can't disclose the store. Is it only Duroc, or do you have mostly Duroc? Can you tell? Like, what does it look like? Like, does the pork look like? Is it like white meat? Just curious. Duroc Cross is good. Keeps the back fat down without too much hit on quality. Durocs were my favorite as a kid. I really liked my Durocs when I had them. They're just like so big and clumsy, but they were kind of sweet in their own. Well, one of them, I had a couple that were not so nice. I had one that was she was a sweetheart, but they all kind of kicked the bucket on me, so now I don't have any Durocs. Eventually, I'll get some again. I really want to get old line Durocs, but to get them, you got to shell out some cash, which right now I got too many pigs and not enough money, so not really a great time for me to be investing in further in breeding stock. I mean, I'm actually at a point now where I really want to keep breeding stock from the stock that I have. And so I'm kind of at a point where I'm closing my herd off because I have enough variety to mix match and to line breed and crossbreed and do all that stuff with the animals that I have for a pretty significant period of time. But if and when I open it up, I'm gonna probably I'm probably going to get some old line Durocs. Yeah, no, the Durocs, they're sweethearts. They were like the one mama, she was kind of, well, I had 3 females that were purebred Durocs. The one, she was kind of, we just never really hit it off. She always had a bad attitude, and she would get very aggressive when she had babies, and she was a real bad mom too, so it was just like a bad combination. The other 2 were both good mamas, and the one, she was, I got hair in my mouth. Sorry you had to witness that sickening display. The other one, she was like the biggest pig on my farm for a while, and she was like, I mean, she was 800 pounds. She was big as a house. I mean, she was enormous. And her first litter, she had like 14 piglets, and she was just very gentle. She wasn't sweet, but she was just kind of like, just whatever. And her sister, the other one, she was just intensely indifferent. Like, she just did not care about you. Like, not in a mean way, but it was just like, totally don't care about you being there. I'm going to walk right through you. I will knock you over. I will rub on you. And kind of, it's like, but she's very much like everything was on her terms. I liked her a lot too. But yeah, Blue Wagon says we did raise one of the old spots. Oh, let me go back a little bit. Not sure what makes the redder meat. Ours are not pastured. They're on the ground though. The only commonality of all the pigs we've raised is a Duroc in the line. Interesting. Iowa has 10x more pink pigs than people. Also interesting. Blue Wagon Farm says we did raise Old Spot in the barn, and her meat was more like store pork. Also interesting. Yeah, I would not have thought that. I mean, you know what, some of it, and this is just kind of, I'm just spitballing here, but I think some of that, like, where my brain goes when I hear that is like, if you think about the athleticism, when you look at an animal, there are some animals, they look like an athlete. There are other animals, you look at them and you're like, okay, so what do you do in your free time? You play video games and you eat Chinese food. Like, what is it you do with yourself? And the more your animals are doers that have to be out moving and being feral, I think that increases tissue perfusion. And the more perfusion you have to the tissue, that's going to increase the oxygenation and the color and the redness of the meat. And the less perfusion that you have, like, for example, I had an old spot, and she had like a lung problem that I didn't know about. Went to butcher her for a customer, and like my butcher got her down to the shop, and he was like, dude, this meat doesn't look very appealing. And the meat was just sallow and pale, and just, he's like, yeah, man, I don't want, he's like, listen, like, Steve, like, and obviously he was in an awkward position because like he had to give me the bad news of like, hey, we just offed your pig, and by the way, like, she needs to go to dog food or the trash. And again, very hard lesson. He was just like, I can't have that coming out of my shop with my label on that. That's not something I want people to. And I was like, dude, I get it. It was a good catch, and we were able to work the situation out. But it was, to me, the thing that became very clear is like the disruptive nature of like the lung condition that she had, where the membrane was growing into her lung, and it was like impeding her ability to breathe and presumably oxygenate blood properly. And as a result, like, her tissue was very like stunted, not stunted, it was plenty of tissue there, but it was very poorly perfused. And you could see that when you open the meat up. And so on some level, if you have an animal that uh you know is out moving and doing, uh then you're going to have, it's just like if you have more muscular and more active animals, you're going to have better looking muscle, and presumably you're going to have better muscle texture. I don't think necessarily tougher. um all It's just going to be different. Like, the pigs that I had that came out of the woods, they were decently fat, but they were like healthy at any size kind of fat. They were not, they were like active and fat. They weren't just lumpy and dumpy and sit on your ass, like, and not do anything. And I think that may have some bearing on all of this. Um, yeah, the old line Durocs, there's a handful of guys down south that have them. I think Cliff Davis is one of them. I don't know if he's selling any of his breed stock. Um, Al Adkins, I want to say he is in South Carolina. And heck, Henry Fudge. Fudge has a bunch of old line. And there's a couple other guys out in the Midwest that also have some. And like, they're available. Like, you can get old line Duroc boars, but you're going to be paying close to $1,000 for a piglet. And look, I've heard really good things. The guys who are the breeders, they're very credible, and there's a lot of good things that I've heard about them. But you got to be in the right position financially to where it makes sense to spend $1,000 on a boar piglet, or a gilt to bring into your herd to add the old line, you know, um, to get the old line sizzle into your product line. Because I got to tell you, like, I spend a lot of time, not a lot of time, but I have spent a decent amount of time in the old line groups on Facebook. Um, hey, Blue Wagon, have a good night. You have a wonderful weekend as well. I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us as well. You have a good night. Thanks for coming by. Um, I spend a decent amount of time in those groups, and I see pictures where people post pictures of their chops, and everybody oohs and ahs over, oh, this is the neck, and this is the shoulder, and this is the loin, and what do you guys think? Is this good enough marbling? And everybody like wants to make sure that everybody else is duly impressed with their meat quality, and I'm like, I don't. I keep my comments to myself because these are older, well-respected gentlemen, and I don't want to be the ones to tell them, "Hey, the king's butt naked. He's not wearing any clothes. Like, what's the big deal?" But like, they're good looking. Had a high forage percentage of its diet, and was on the dirt a whole bunch, and not mud, but like dirt that it could root, eat, play, benefit from, and I think that, again, my hypothesis is that some of the importance of breed and genetics, I'm not sure that it is not always a little bit overhyped in order to sell a product at a premium for the benefit of the people who are cultivating it. And hey, look, I mean, there's people that would probably say that about my breed stock, and I charge a little more for my breed stock too, and I have no shame in doing so. Um, but there's an extent to which when you're selling that kind of a product, you're not selling the steak anymore, you're selling the sizzle. And still would like to try it because I like some sizzle. I got nothing against that. But yeah, Facebook is definitely now all it's definitely getting older. Um, yeah, boy, the political stuff on Facebook is real fun. But I stay out of there. I stay out of there. It's tempting. I had a few memes I was going to throw out there, but I haven't. I've exercised restraint. All right, guys, it's been 2 hours. It is now the 28th of March, and I think this is about good time as any to wrap things up. How many people do we have in here right now? Well, I can't see. It doesn't matter. Um, you guys have been fantastic. I enjoy having these conversations, kicking stuff around with you all. Um, if you guys have topics that you think might be interesting for us to focus on in upcoming streams, drop a comment. I'm going to try to put out call it a feeler post on the YouTube channel like Wednesday-ish to kind of whet some appetites for what we might discuss um, next Friday. And then that way we have a little bit of runway going into the conversation about kind of what's going on. And, um, so it's, I enjoy these. I enjoy these live streams. It's a good chance to commiserate, and it's nice to visit with everybody. I am hoping to get some videos out too over the next couple of weeks as well. So, oh yeah, Mr. Lightfoot, you're 100% on a list. I can guarantee that. And yeah, not being on Facebook puts you on a list as well. So it's like there's not really much anybody can do to. I don't know if hide is the right word, but privacy is kind of imaginary at this point, I would say. So, for better or worse, I mean, we're not stuck in here with them, they're stuck in here with us. That's kind of the way I look at it. Bolino's Bounty says, I haven't updated my Facebook in ages, and we're all on a list for one thing or another. Oh, yeah. And if we're farming and we're growing animals and making America farmers again, that's definitely, there's no chance that that is something that will be appreciated by the powers that be. I mean, just one look at the regulatory strictures around any kind of business that dabbles in agriculture is enough to tell you that they're not on our side. They're not looking to help with things. They're definitely looking to put the squeeze to the farmers. Yeah, big. I don't know if anybody saw the Sean Ryan interview that he did with, I forget the guy's name, but he's a guy who's running for governor of Iowa. Um, had several generations deep farmers in his family, and basically was just fed up with the monopolies of big ag and kind of how they're screwing small family farms and farmers, and they're making it untenable to do business in that industry anymore. And it's yeah, big ag is, it's a thing, and I'm not close enough to it to rant and rave about it, so I generally try to stay in my lane, although I probably could think of some things to say about, like, government subsidies to keep land fallow for, controlling the price of commodities and stuff like that. I'm not crazy about all that stuff, but that's I got to do a little bit more research before I speak on that. But yeah, there's a lot in the big ag sector that is concerning, to say the least. It's very, I mean, in the same way as like the big pharmaceutical drugs and the medical industry, where people kind of got to look behind the curtain during the pandemic with big ag. Everybody sees the picture on the butter box and they think, oh, red barn, rolling hills, sunset in the background, and green grass and birds chirping. They're not thinking like the bird is, you know, thrutching and dying in a puddle somewhere where its infested carcass is gonna like give off all kinds of like cancer spores and toxins into the water, and then the mosquitoes are gonna land on there and wipe their rear ends in the water and then go off and start biting people. Like the reality of what is like is really big ag is a crossroads between the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry. It's kind of like the focal point of a lot of the technology, because people are a little concerned about the pharmaceuticals or concerned about the medical stuff, but when it comes to food, people are like, yeah, it tastes good, no big deal. And all of the implementation and the execution of the pharmaceutical and medical and who knows what else, I'm just kind of summarizing, that is done in other areas, it comes to bear and is executed in and through the food. And when you look at those maps of where all the and there's like, Sean Ryan's really been on a tear. If you guys, I'm assuming most people who are on YouTube know who Sean Ryan is. Um, but he's big podcast, former Navy SEAL. It does interviews and stuff with people, and he's like talking about he's been on a bender here lately, because like 618,000 people last year died of cancer. That's a lot of people dying of cancer, and like the vast majority of those people are, there's like, when you look at the data plotted, how many of those deaths are occurring in Iowa, where the majority of the fertilizer and the chemicals and etc., where a lot of that stuff is applied and sprayed. Correlation, maybe not causation, but there's a lot of like legalese and adjustments and things that are kind of squirrely in the way that they pitch some of that stuff, and like the formulation the of the chemicals, because they use a lot of the same chemicals that have a lot fewer side effects in other parts of the world, but they have different formulations that they use in the United States that make them more toxic. Now, you could say whether or not that's by design in order to put a dent in our population or to subjugate our populace. That's a different conversation, probably for a different channel at a different time. But, um, you know, it's, well, it brings us to the point that we need to be raising our own food and being able to take as much control over our food system, and certainly our culture and our land and to be able to have that relationship with our land where the land that we have produces for us. So yeah, Northern Lightfoot says they tore down all the red barns after they bought all the farms where I grew up. Very sad. It is. One of my favorite groups, back to Facebook briefly, one of my favorite groups on Facebook is like the Old Barns group. They have the pictures of the old barns. And upstate New York still has a lot of barns left. They have some beautiful old barns. Some of them are falling down. Occasionally you'll see ones that people are fixing up and turning into a wedding venue or something, some nonsense like that. But yeah, the barns are, we want to hold on to that as much as we can. And I am here doing what I'm doing because I want to fight tooth and nail for every scrap. And I mean, to be fair, you know, I got scraps of that American dream here, but I'm going to hold on to every scrap that I can with everything that I got, because I believe it is worth fighting for and worth preserving. And more people doing that is going to be better than not, you know. Yeah, remodeled barns. It's wealthy parts of Connecticut, upstate New York. Yeah, it's the same deal. And it's sad because like you drive by those barns and it's just like, damn, I would love to put some hogs in that barn. That just, oh, that looks beautiful. And then it's, I mean, like the Amish have some real nice barns. I got to say that they do a great job with the barns. Like, hats off to the Amish. Like they do a great job. But I'm not Amish, so here we are. Anyways, folks, on that note, it's been a bit. We've had a good time. Looking forward to doing another stream next week. I know this is like the 4th time I've wrapped up, but yeah, it's like Seinfeld said, you gotta rock the vending machine over a few times before you tip it and it goes. So here we are. But yeah, give a holler. Let me know what you guys are thinking about, stuff that you want to talk about, and we can incorporate that into next week's live streaming topics. Going to get some videos out here, promise. If you guys haven't already liked the video, subscribe to the channel. Memberships are open. If you guys want to support what we're doing here, probably should have said this earlier. Now we're down to like the diehards and the people who are already supporting, but the channel memberships are open, a couple bucks a month, something that reasonably speaking we can get away with, and that help us make more content here and grow what we're doing. And appreciate you guys, and we'll hopefully be getting together here next few months as summer comes around, and maybe we'll get to taste some pork and meet in person. That'd be really cool. So y'all have a good night, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you guys on the next video and live stream.